Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and today we're making podcast history because in 600 episodes, we've never had anyone on to talk more specifically to the entrepreneurial side of things. I know that so many of you listeners are still very career focused as you ramp up and get to the place where you can take your business full time. So we've got an incredible guest on here today who's going to walk us through the job side of things. And for all of you entrepreneurs, myself included, I'm very excited to hear her perspectives and tips and strategies when it comes to the hiring side. So we're going to be talking about both sides of the coin today with an incredible guest. I'm going to tell you about her. Her name is Peri Ginsberg. She is the CEO and founder of Workforce Ready Now. Peri brings over 10 years of full desk recruitment experience for startup, private equity, VC, and publicly traded organizations. Prior to her recruitment career, Peri gained noteworthy corporate experience as a mergers and acquisitions systems specialist with Andersen Consulting. She's been the director of IT and a portfolio manager with Office Depot, and she brings previous entrepreneurial experience building and operating a chain of high-end children's salons, which I think is so cool. She had multiple locations and ended up selling her kids' salons. She won a whole bunch of awards for it too. So Peri not only is amazing at her subject matter expertise, but she's an incredible entrepreneur that I'm so excited to dive into all this stuff with her today. Throughout her career, though, Peri noticed that students, upon graduating from college, were overwhelmingly underprepared to navigate their way into the workforce. As a college grad, I can totally say that I was guilty of that as well. Peri married her extensive corporate America and hiring expertise with her passion for working with young adults to build her modern methodology to provide workforce readiness coaching, thus the birth of Workforce Ready Now. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview today with Peri Ginsberg. Peri, I am so excited you're here today. Welcome to the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for inviting me and for that wonderful introduction.
Heck yeah. Well, let's face it, you and I were already having fun before we even hit record today. We're just two Northerners who are down here living in Florida these days on opposite coasts of Florida. But I'm excited for you to fill in the gaps for listeners. Take them beyond the bio and tell them, who is Peri? How the heck did we end up here?
Oh, I'd love to. It's not a simple answer, but I don't think anybody is defined simply. But I have a very traditional background that education was incredibly important to my family. So I was fortunate to go to college, and I got my master's degree as well. And in my time, maybe not so unlike today, there was a lot of pressure for you to pick a major that automatically would lend to a career. So I actually pursued engineering. I was a math and science individual. I can't tell you that I particularly had a passion for engineering, but I knew that it would mean I would get a job. And I was right, and I did. Since then, I've actually changed careers multiple times, and that's actually a really important part of my background when speaking with young adults graduating, that change is part of life. But throughout my career, I was constantly looking for opportunities where I felt I was contributing. I have been very successful financially in my positions, and I've left really high-paying jobs because I didn't feel I was contributing enough. I didn't go to sleep at night feeling that I've actually made a difference in any way. And one theme that I constantly saw that I was passionate about was working with kids and young adults in the space of confidence building. I know that seems off from what I'm doing right now, but it really was about building self-esteem and confidence, because I believe those are the foundations for anybody's success. And success can be defined any way you want to, but self-esteem and confidence are the foundations. I found myself as a recruiter for the past 10 years. I worked with a lot of entry-level talent as well as senior executive talent, but I overwhelmingly saw a lack of self-confidence and self-esteem, and it was impacting their ability to navigate into the job world. And that was really what the birth of Workforce Ready Now came out of.
Yeah, I love that overview for so many reasons. I think it's because me as well. Like for me, I love working with college students. Actually, anytime I need to hire for any open position in any of my businesses, my first instinct is always an ambitious, hungry college kid. And I think the reason is because that's how I got my start. I know firsthand, you and I were talking about schools before we hit record today. You know the school that I went to in the Boston area. And so Bentley University, they pride themselves on students having internships. So as a college kid, I was in real life businesses getting that experience, and I know how that gave me a leg up. And I like how you start with so much. It's for you, it's not just about getting your resume right, getting your cover letter right. It is about also figuring out, hey, what the heck am I going to do, and what may that lead to? When I look back, none of the jobs I had made sense at the time, but now they all feed into what I'm doing today. What is your process for helping kids to navigate that difficult world? Not just kids, but really what we're talking about today is any job seeker.
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, my focus really is in the college-aged individual right now, but my background is working with individuals at every level of their professional career. And a lot of what I focused on, alluding to my introduction, is really that self-esteem and confidence. It's really important that you can speak to your values and what you feel you can contribute. And there's no wrong or right answer to that. It's unique to the individual. So when I'm working with somebody, whether it's to start their career or maybe pivot to a new career, I really spend a lot of time trying to understand how the individual values themselves. What do they feel are their strongest attributes? And not just technical skills. I'm not talking about the ability to create a massive Excel spreadsheet. That is a great skill, and for many careers, it's a requirement. But I'm really talking about their soft skills, about are they someone who should be client-facing? Are they somebody who really excels when they have to solve puzzles and problem solving and the analytical components? So before I really try to help someone define what field should we go after? Let's define what you feel are the greatest values that you bring to the workplace. And that's where we always launch the conversation.
Yeah, and that's a great place to launch. But Peri, I feel like this is a fun conversation for me today because as someone who's on the flip side of this now, as someone who hires quite a few people in all my different businesses, I know one thing as a hirer that I wonder if college students, if people who are looking for jobs understand this. So, rewind 10 years ago and Upwork, for example, let's use that as a hiring platform. That's one that I turn to all the time when I need hands for different projects and for different businesses. When I post a position on Upwork, within an hour, I've got at least 30 applicants. And it is a crowded world. And Peri, I'm sure you and I can both agree here, is that it's only getting even more crowded. Times are interesting in the labor force. What are some of those ways to stand out? I know what I look for, and I think part of our conversation today is you're probably going to change a little bit about what I look for, but what are the things that can make you stand out in such a crazy crowded marketplace?
Well, although I don't want to put too much emphasis on the resume, the truth is the resume often is your introduction. So there's a lot of importance. And there are many ways that a great resume can present itself. There's not just my way. There are many ways. But when I'm working with someone, and again, my focus is really on that entry-level talent or college student looking for internships, I go with the methodology. And this is not unique to me, that you've got 7 seconds. In 7 seconds, that hiring manager or that recruiter, whoever is on the other side of that screen, has to know who you are, and what are you looking for. And if it takes that hiring manager or recruiter more than 7 seconds to figure that out, if they have to read and try to interpret, I think what he or she is saying is this, your likelihood of getting invited to an interview is really minimal. You have to understand that the competitiveness today is far different than when I joined the workforce. When I applied to a job the old-fashioned way, there were probably tens of other candidates. Today, because of the ease of going online and submitting your resume, hundreds of candidates are submitting their resume to the same position as you. The competition is fierce. So you need to make that resume as clear as possible, you have to put in the keywords that you know that hiring manager is looking for, and you have to ensure they don't have to work to interpret what you're looking for. That is the first key to getting noticed and getting that door open to a conversation.
Yeah, I love that, especially because I think I really enjoy that we're talking about this in the context of college students, because Peri, I remember when I was a college student putting my resume together, there was one obstacle that I know I felt that every single classmate of mine felt. And that was, at the end of the day, we didn't have experience. We didn't have past jobs and internships to brag about and show that we're competent. And so what we had to do, and I really learned this lesson back then, which I think really holds true for me here today as a business owner, is that all of this is just about storytelling. It's all just about marketing. I remember my first ever job, Peri, I'm going to have a public confession with you here in today's episode. My first ever job was CVS, and I only worked there for 2 days before I quit because I hated it. And then I turned that into, I found a search engine optimization internship. And that internship set me up in so many different ways for success later in life as well. And what I realized is that the CVS position, could it look quote unquote bad on a resume? If I did put it on a resume as a 2-day job, sure it could. But I think the more important thing is I learned how to craft a message, how to craft a story around my journey up to that point. Can you talk about the importance of storytelling? Because obviously I've got my marketer hat on, but you're the expert here when it comes to job hunting. Walk us through that.
You nailed it, Brian. It really is about storytelling. There are very few experiences that you've had in life, whether it's real professional work experience, whether it's on a sports field, it's in the classroom, or in your personal life, that didn't help you develop experience. And I kind of want to define that for a second. Experience is not just in the workforce. Experience is not just from internships. Now, of course, internships are excellent, and I highly recommend all college students get that opportunity, not solely to make your resume look good, but also to help you start defining what your interests are while you still have an opportunity to pivot academically. But what's really important in terms of storytelling is when an individual, perhaps someone like you, Brian, is looking for a college student or hiring an entry-level new graduate, they know that what you bring is education. And I think today college students don't understand that what they're learning in the classroom, their team projects, their research, their writings, it is experience. So I work a lot with the students. I dive into their classes. I learn about different, again, papers they've written, team projects. I dive into it. I want to understand what they were about. I'm listening to the dynamics of how a team worked together. Where did they have leadership? They took the initiative to be the presenter in a class. These are skills that align with the professional world. So I put a lot of focus telling the story of what they did in school and translating that into the professional language that most hiring managers are interested in.
Yeah, I like that you took it that way, because it almost does feel like we've been tricked into believing that experience can only equal on the year's job experience. But you're right, that's absolutely not true. And it actually takes us outside of the domain of just jobs. And it's one thing that really stands out about what you do at Workforce Ready now is that when you talk about helping people find jobs, you go way beyond that. For example, one thing that stood out to me is social media presence, because as a hirer, I know that that's part of my research process, but I don't think when I was actively looking for positions, I thought about that with regards to myself. Talk to us about some of those things, some of those red flags. I feel like you're going to expose everything about my hiring process today, Peri, but talk to us about all that good stuff.
Well, to be fair, there's no right or wrong, but what I take seriously is to give my students advice on different things that hiring managers are looking at. So again, I bring 10 years of recruiting. So I've worked with clients across all different industries, public, private. I can't count how many offers were lost because the hiring manager did a search on the candidate's social media presence, and something they found either didn't align with their culture or they felt was inappropriate. And college students in general are not being taught that what they're doing on their private time is actually going to play a role in their professional future. And generation like me, I didn't grow up with social media. It's more complicated today for these students to understand that there's such visibility to all aspects of their life. And so when I'm working with these students, I'm doing a thorough search into their social media. Now, nobody has to do what I say, but I'm giving advice. I'm telling them that this content here, it could be conveyed as XYZ, and that can turn off certain kind of companies. An example could be overly representing a political view, overly representing a religious view. Now, if that is fundamentally something that you want your employer to know, and you only want to work for an employer that is aligned with that, I respect that. But it's my job to let you know that it could impact that wider employer field that we're going after. It's just not something that's taught in college, that you've got to be careful what you're doing on social media in your personal life, because that will affect your future.
Yeah, 100%. You're right. Especially today with, you always say with all these answers, you keep saying that there's no wrong answer for any of these. Well, you're right in that there's also no wrong way to use social media. Some people use social media for everything. They post kind of the cliche of like what I ate for lunch today. Some people only post major life milestones. We all use social media in different ways. So it's really helpful to have that third party observer to say, hey, just so you know, this is the way that it could be construed. So I love that perspective, Peri. I got to ask you about this. I feel like it must, in your line of work, always be the elephant in the room. And that is, we've talked about resumes, we've talked about social media, we've still got other stuff to dive into, but of course, we can't ignore the interview. And so interviews, again, coming back to there's no wrong way to interview. I remember, especially when I was graduating college, looking for my first ever job in consulting, there's some crazy ways to do interviews out there. And I felt very unprepared. One interviewer asked me how many nickels would fit in this room that we're sitting in. And I was like, how does that fit in with what I'm going to be doing on this job? But talk to us about interviews at a high level. And I'm sure there's going to be elements of it that we dive deeper into.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well, obviously, interview is incredibly important. And for me, I can't be in that room with you. So how I prepare you is fundamental to what I offer. This is gonna surprise many people. The first thing most hiring managers are looking for is not your professional experience. It's not what technical skills do you have. It's likability and relatability. And I tell people this at every level of an organization who's interviewing. That's not to say those other things aren't important. Of course they are. But if you are not likable and relatable, the conversation doesn't go any further. I have never met somebody who wanted to work with somebody they didn't want to work with. And that's really important. So when I'm dealing with these recent graduates and college students, that's where we start. We start with likability and relatability, and it usually helps boost their confidence too. They start to smile, they start to relax a little. I have them tell me about themselves, and I'm already beginning to get them past but I don't have any experience, I haven't worked with many hiring managers will take a leap of faith if they find that likable individual that comes up with the strong work ethic. So we start there. It's really important for me to teach individuals how to listen. And that's not common sense to everybody. I tell them to not go in with canned responses. Don't memorize sentences. Have a bullet point list of the key points you hope to convey throughout the interview, but listen to how a question is delivered to you. Hear what you feel they're focusing on and what's important to their environment, to their workplace. And I also teach them techniques on how to give really direct answers, not to ramble, but also keep it open-ended to allow the interviewer to ask more questions. You want to engage. You want to build a conversation. And that is a skill that is taught. It is not necessarily something that you're born with.
Yes, amen to all of that. Peri, as you're talking about these things, part of me is like, wait, are you also giving us guidelines on how to have an incredible podcast episode? Because these are all the things when I have entrepreneurs on the show, it's really, these are the things that I feel like is that nobody cares about, necessarily where you got your degree from or all these other things. They care about, are you likable? Do you come on air with a smile, passionate about what it is that you talk about? And obviously listeners know this about this show. A lot of guests are really surprised by this, is that there are no pre-planned questions. And the reason why that is because I don't want you as a guest, Peri, to have any pre-planned answers. And that always makes for the most engaging conversation. And it's clear how that applies across the board, whether it's job interviews, sales presentations, podcast interviews, whatever it is. I like that. But it leads me to the natural question, which is I'm sure it'll pique listeners' interest to hear about likability. And the natural question there is, how do I become more likable? And how do I show that I'm likable?
Not an easy thing, and it takes practice. I have people stand in front of mirrors and really practice. But the first thing I do is I teach them about eye contact, about body language, about smiling. And as you mentioned, this is not just useful skills for interviewing. There's really very few aspects of your life that this isn't a valuable thing to learn. Be engaging. I tell everybody before their interview, do research on who this individual is. Look to see if they have a LinkedIn profile. Google them. Look to see if you can find any commonality. You may not, but maybe you're from the same state. Maybe you went to a similar school, or maybe that college was a rivalry. Look for something, anything, a conversation piece, so that you can bring in a little of a personal aspect to the conversation. What I tell individuals is they're not interested in robotic answers. It's okay if occasionally you say or like, or they're not judging you. For the most part, perhaps there are certain jobs where this is not the best advice. For the most part, they're not interested in ensuring that you speak with perfection. They're interested in the content of your answer and the excitement and the engagement in which you deliver it. So I do mock interviews just to focus on body language and engagement and excitement. I tell individuals an interview should not be a poker hand. Do not keep your emotion close to the vest. If you're interested and excited and engaged, show it.
Yeah, I like that. Peri, I'm going to call this out because I think it's something that's so unique about your approach. And I can imagine this is why college students who work with you just come out so much more prepared and so much better of candidates when they go through this stuff, because you're really focusing on the soft skills. I'm of the firm belief that anyone can learn anything. Anyone that I hire, if they are a likable person, I can get them to the point that they can complete these basic tasks. What I think is more important is all these things that you're talking about as far as likability. But you already talked about the interview. Obviously, that's one hurdle between us liking them and hiring them. What are some of those things on both the applicant side, but also obviously selfishly, I'm asking you from an employer side, what are some of those questions that can help gauge the effectiveness of a potential hire?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to talk as a manager. So I have had teams as great as 50 people working for me. So I was the hiring manager for a very long time as well. And I probably spent more of that interview talking about soft skills than I did hard skills, for exactly the reason that you just said. If I like you, and if you are coming off with a type of energy and excitement, and I'm gauging your work ethic, because work ethic to me is critical. I don't believe that's something that for a professional that I can teach. I think you have to come to me with it. I really like to ask some behavioral questions about certain scenarios they were in. One of my favorite questions is, talk to me about a goal that you set for yourself that unfortunately you were not able to accomplish, and how did you handle it? I am looking for individuals who pick themselves up, who shake themselves off, who accept their failures as a learning experience that is only going to benefit their future. That to me, are the type of questions that I'm asking of individuals. I can teach the technical skills if I've got somebody with the core of resilience, of confidence, of work ethic. So my questions are really geared towards gauging their confidence in themselves, which is exactly where I started this conversation. And yes, there's a balance between confidence and humble, but I'm looking for that individual who can fail and it doesn't derail them. It only incents them to take the lessons of that failure and turn it into their future success. I'm asking questions to determine, do you have that type of character?
Yeah, Peri, I love that overview, especially because it shows that I don't care about a great spreadsheet that you've built previously. I care about when problems will arise, which they will. How are you going to handle that? So again, Peri, so many of your answers come back to these soft skills and really the attitude behind it, which reminds me, it's this meme that I saw ages ago, which remind you that no matter who you are, there are certain things, how much you've learned or how much you've not learned, there are certain things we can always control. Our persistence, our work ethic, showing up on time. All of those things, no matter who we are in our control. And those are the things that make us great employees, future great entrepreneurs, so many interesting things there. So I love that overview, Peri. The one thing that I want to ask you about is I feel like things are shifting. Things are always shifting, quite frankly, but I've seen so many different trends in the way that other people are hiring, in the way that when I talk to people who are looking for jobs, they tell me these things are happening in the marketplace. I'm just like, dang, really? Such as doing example projects. More and more employers are saying, hey, we want to sit you down and see how you perform on this example project. Talk to us about that sort of approach, but also even more broadly, what are some of those big shifts you've seen in the way that companies are hiring?
Those are great questions. So let me start with the latter question first, and the shifts in the way people are hiring. And this is the really this is critical. As I mentioned, when I applied for a job decades ago, tens of other people applied. It wasn't all automated. It was a much more manual process, and it certainly didn't have the type of competition that they have today. Today, they're faced with intense competition because of the ease of the way of being able to apply to jobs online. I liken it to college applications. When I applied, it was handwritten. It wasn't easy for me to apply to 15 colleges. Now, with the introduction of the Common App, it's really not that complicated to apply to a lot of colleges, which of course leads to a far greater number of applicants and then the competitiveness. So, how do you deal with this shift? One thing that I do is I focus a lot on networking and connections. I have discovered, and I am a mother of 2 college-age students as well. They don't generally choose to listen to anything I say, but I'm quite competent in understanding that generation. And COVID, the pandemic really did play a role in their communication skills. So I focus a lot on developing their network and helping them how to communicate. So, for example, one of my students called me the other day. We had marketed him to a particular company that he had interest in, and the CEO of that company sent him a LinkedIn connection request. And he called me all excited that the CEO of this company just sent him a LinkedIn connection request, but he didn't feel it was appropriate to send a message. They don't know. This is a tool that they're not overly confident in. Many of them post-pandemic are not overly confident in their communication skills unless it's in the form of a text. And I coached him on the fact that this is exactly the individual that you should be communicating with. He sent you a connection request through a professional platform inviting you to connect with him professionally. Now, there's the right way and the wrong way, but the number one wrong way is to not message him. So that's some of the tools that I'm teaching these students, how to leverage the tools that are available to them. I give this example about communication skills. My daughter, several years ago, she got an internship with a law firm. Really excited for her. And I remember after her first day, I was all excited to talk to her about the onboarding. And, she shared everything with me. And I happened to ask, what's the pay schedule? When do you get paid? And she looked at me with horror that would have been the most inappropriate question to ask. When is payday? And that was part of when I decided this group needs some guidance and advice. I explained to her that they know you're there, for experience and also to get paid. It is an acceptable question to ask HR when it is the pay period. They don't know. They need guidance in what's the appropriate thing to ask. How do I communicate certain things? I would say 80% of what my focus is helping them learn how to communicate effectively, both in person, virtually, written, whether it's thank you notes. I am really advancing their knowledge on how to communicate professionally, the do's, the don'ts. And more often than not, there's a lot of do's that they just think are not don'ts.
Yeah, Peri, I'm so glad that obviously you have 2 college age kids, so you understand it, but I'm so glad that you used the example of asking about pay, because I have a younger sister who is a professional student up to this point. She's been in vet school for basically the past decade, including undergrad and grad school. And so as my little sister is entering the workforce now, I see that, exact same example that you gave. She's like, I don't want to ask about pay. I don't want to ask about vacation time. I don't want to ask about being a vet, like there's urgent emergency calls on weekends and nights, and she doesn't want to ask these questions. And I always tell her, I'm like, it's only as awkward as you make it. Like, these are natural questions. So I love that you use that as the overview. Peri, I will say this, as we come towards the end of the interview, I did promise you before we hit record today that time was going to fly, and it certainly has, but I can't let you go just yet, because there's really, I guess I'm going to squeeze 2 more questions out of you. The first of which is, I observe as someone who hires a lot of college age kids, I see that they use, so we talked about text message, for example, versus you and we've done things more traditionally. I'm so grateful I didn't have Facebook when I was in high school, for example. That's even newer for my generation. But I remember back when we were applying is that there was a traditional way of applying. You submit your resume, your cover letter, maybe you do a follow-up phone call to check in. That was part of our process. But today's kids are using different tools. Every once in a while, I'll get a personalized video from someone. And in a stack of applications and in a stack of people who want to be considered for the job, if you send me a personal video and you mention something about me or my businesses or a recent podcast episode, you're in. Like, you're for sure going to have a conversation with me. What are some of those kind of higher tech, newer ways that you see job applicants using that really works and catches attention?
The example you just gave was phenomenal. I love the personalized video. Of course, there's appropriate and inappropriate content to share, but what you nailed is not only did they send this video, which makes them stand out. You're looking to stand out. Highly competitive field here, but they did their homework. They knew who you were. They made mention of you. They customized that video. That video wasn't going to be sent to 20 other employers. It showed you that they took the time to research and to understand who they were sending it to. And that is critical. That is critical in a resume. It is very, very appropriate to have multiple versions of a resume to speak to different paths that you're pursuing. Your cover letter, it's customized to the job you're applying to. It's not a generic, hey, I'm seeking any summer internship. It is customized. It may mention their mission statement and how that resonates with you. So I love the video. I do believe that it is appropriate that once you apply to a job, if by chance you're using, the standard job boards, the Indeeds, the LinkedIns, that go to LinkedIn. Find some individuals on LinkedIn that work there, perhaps more senior individuals who would be hiring managers. Connect with them. We call it mushrooming the company. Find different pathways into the company, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's email, whether it's a phone call. There's a line between aggressive and harassment. Let's be straight there. But don't just assume that submitting a resume through a job board in and of itself is going to get that door open for you. You've got to make yourself known. You've got to be a little bit more aggressive in how you go after, and that's how you beat the competition.
Ooh, Peri, I love that answer because you also threw a little bit of shade at copy paste culture. I will very transparently say what Peri just gave for advice there is 1,000,000% true. If I can tell that you are copying and pasting the exact same application to a million different jobs, you don't even say one thing acknowledging that I'm different from all the other ones that you're applying to, then I know that you are not different from all the other ones that are applying. So Peri, really good advice there. As we come towards the end of this interview, I also want to ask you on the flip side, because the reason why we reached out to you to have you on the show is that I am a very big believer in the work that you do. I think that college talent is there to be molded and to be grown. Honestly, my goal of every single hire and every hire that I've ever made knows this, and they all embrace this, is that I don't believe it's just about molding. I believe that college age kids can far exceed anything that we teach them because of the tech that they're used to, and because of all of that, my goal with every hire is that they can one day go ahead and start their own business and crush it, be even more successful than I've been able to be at this point in my entrepreneurial journey. So I'd love to just open the stage to you. Tell entrepreneurs, tell all the ones who are listening to this episode today, why is hiring college kids or fresh grads, what is the advantage of that approach?
Oh, there's so many advantages. First, again, I don't want to say you can mold them either. That's not the right terminology. However, they're not coming with a history of bad habits. They're not coming from a history of working under poor leadership. They're new, they're fresh, and they're hungry. They are eager to be given an opportunity to develop skills, and they're sponges. This young talent can pick up technology faster than any generation prior to them. And they're hungry, and they come with ideas. This generation, there's always exceptions, but this generation wants to be heard. And quite honestly, I want to hire thought leaders. Now, I say thought leaders. That doesn't mean I expect everybody to come in and be an immediate CEO. Even if their task is organizing files, I want an individual who is thinking about how can we organize these files better? How could we streamline? How could we cut costs? I feel the younger generation wants to be heard and wants to participate strategically. It could be at the smallest level, but this is a group of people that, from a compensation perspective, is going to be pretty fair, compared to talent that comes with 15, 20, 25 years experience. They're just starting out. They are hungry. They bring creative new ideas that generations before them haven't thought through. We didn't have the technology that exists today that we could have even dreamt of it. I just find that this group's ability to make a dent in the future is greater than any group before. And I think hiring managers really need to change their attitude on that they have to have an exact skill. No, they have to have an attitude. They have to have a work ethic. And if you find that in a college student, what you could pave this individual towards, the future that you can offer this individual, it's limitless.
Heck yes. And it really is so much of that. And I see it in you, Peri, because obviously you do this for a living. You help these kids, is that you also get that renewed energy that they bring. That's what I really love bringing onto my team, because you're right. I'm not hiring a drone, and I don't want to hire a drone. And these college kids are entering businesses and saying, wait, hold on. I know that you do it this way, and I'll totally do the application, or I'll do the project that you asked me for. But hey, there's also this tool, or there's also this other way. Maybe I explore it and I'll get back to you and show you how it works. Those are the types of initiatives that comes from that fresh energy. So Peri, I love your passion for all of those things. Towards the end of these interviews, I always love giving my guests the hard job, which is, we talked about a lot of things in today's interview. We talked about resumes, cover letters, not copying and pasting, the interviews. We talked about all those different things. Give us some action items. What should we do? And I'm going to give you a very difficult task that I don't give to most guests, which is a 2-pronged action item list. So 1, on the job seeker side, what is the one thing that they should do today to start standing out and increasing their success rate when it comes to this? And two, on the employer side, what's something that we can do to make sure that we set our new hires, these college kids or anybody really, up for success as we onboard them?
Great questions. Great questions. Okay, let me talk about the job seeker first. And this applies not only to the college student, which is where my focus is, but to any level of professional. Don't rely solely on job ads. They are great tools and they should be a tool in your tool belt, but hundreds of other applicants are applying as well. And as a former recruiter, I know that I didn't open every resume that I received. The volume was too great. So nowadays, larger companies are using bots. What does that mean? That means that they're automatically searching resumes and they're looking for keywords. And if you do not have those keywords in your resume, it's never going to be opened by a hiring manager. So it is essential that your resume and your cover letter aligns itself with the job that you are applying for. Make sure that you're reading the qualifications, the responsibilities. Now, do not lie, do not over embellish, but if they are saying that they are looking for leadership skills, then you should have an example. The word leadership needs to be in there. And again, it could be talking about a team project in class, but you need to pull out those key disciplines in your resume so that you can get past that bot. The second thing for the job seeker is that do not just apply. Go to LinkedIn, send messages to who you feel are key decision makers in the company. Do a Google search and try to find an email to a hiring manager and make an introduction saying that you applied. Do the work to get yourself in the door and don't just sit back and hope that you're going to get a response from a job ad. Go the extra mile. Now, the flip side, the other question that you ask is what should hiring managers or employers do to really help ensure the success of that entry-level talent? Well, I can't overstate the implementation of a mentorship in a company. And mentorships should not only be exclusive to big Fortune 100 companies. A 10-person company, a 5-person company can have a mentorship. Mentorships are meant to provide guidance. This is not training. Training is a separate aspect that companies hopefully will offer as well. But mentorship is to help continue to build the confidence of your new hire. This is where I started the conversation and maybe where we're ending the conversation. There is nothing that substitutes confidence in the employee. If they feel confident in their abilities, if they feel confident that the company is setting them up to succeed and not fail, if they feel confident that if they make a mistake, it's okay, that they will learn from it. The company is not going to be disappointed in them. They're going to turn it into a learning experience. This is what a mentor can do for an individual in a company, is to guide them into not being afraid to take a chance, not being afraid to ask questions. This is how you can make entry-level talent successful, by giving them the confidence that it's okay to fail. And once you do that, they're going to succeed, and it's going to be a tremendously worthwhile investment for you.
Peri, I'll tell you what, I knew that was a difficult task when I lobbed you such a general question, but holy cow, you came with incredible advice on both sides of the coin, and I so appreciate that. You also make all this stuff fun. Your energy is clearly so deep for all of this stuff. You're super passionate about it, so I love all of the wisdom that you've dropped on us in today's episode. At this point, I'd love to open the stage for you. Tell listeners where the heck they can learn more about all the awesome work that you're doing at Workforce Ready Now. Any other links, don't be shy about dropping them.
Well, thank you, Brian. And again, thank you for having me. Best way to contact us would be to go to our website, which is www.workforcereadynow.com. On there, there's opportunities to schedule a free consult. You can sign up for our mailing list. You can send a message. I'm on the other side of it. I'm monitoring it all day long. So that's the best way to make immediate contact. Of course, we've got strong social media presence on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, all at Workforce Ready Now. So lots of ways to communicate with us. Just reach out, ask for a couple minutes for you and I to speak. What I do is I work hard to understand what goals you have in mind, whether it's the student or the parent. I explain my approach on how I can align to their goals, and then we make a decision on what's the right way to move forward. But I would love to hear from some of our viewers, even if they just want to talk about how they perhaps they're doing something that's similar that could be leveraged together.
Heck yes. So you all heard it directly from Peri. She's been a wealth of knowledge today. Check out her business website at workforcereadynow.com, And of course, you all know all these links that Peri just mentioned, as well as to her socials, her LinkedIn, especially, are down below in the show notes. So don't be shy about checking those out and go straight to workforcereadynow.com. Otherwise, Peri, thank you so much for coming on today to the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you, Brian. It was such a pleasure being on the show with you.